Today is Super Tuesday number 2, and I want to warn everybody and remind everybody what's at stake in this election. So I know I look like a cop at the moment, but try to ignore that and focus on the substance of what I'm about to say. Joe Biden's record. Joe Biden supported the Iraq War. That led to minimum 200,000 innocent civilians dying in Iraq. That led to thousands of our own brave young men and women in uniform being killed. It cost, at the very least, $2 trillion already. When all is said and done, about $7 trillion. So whenever he says, how are we going to afford X, Y, or Z for the people, you should remember he voted for this monstrosity called the Iraq War. He supported NAFTA and permanent normal trade relations with China and a bunch of other outsourcing deals which destroyed the American working class. And those deals were basically written for the owners of the corporations, for the elites. They wanted to make more profit, and if they had to screw over American workers in the process and outsource the jobs to China and elsewhere, they absolutely were going to do those things. And they did. And Joe Biden was there to aid and abet them. Joe Biden supported the Patriot Act. The simple way of talking about that is Joe Biden supports unconstitutional, illegal spying and taking away your protection from unreasonable search and seizure. Joe Biden was one of the biggest proponents of TPP, the Trans-Pacific Partnership, which yet again would have been a trade deal that devastated the American working class. And in that deal, they wanted to allow corporations to sue for loss of expected future profits, which is just a fancy way of saying they wanted the taxpayers, regular people, to help fund corporations to make more profit. So they wanted to hose you to give more money to the elites. Joe Biden supported the repeal of Glass-Steagall. The repeal of Glass-Steagall is one of the most important factors that led to the subprime mortgage crisis and the Great Recession. That set up a wall of separation between commercial banking and investment banking, which is just a fancy way of saying repealing Glass-Steagall made it so that we had casino capitalists gambling with your money in a very risky way, which ended up backfiring in their face. Joe Biden, of course, supported the war on drugs. We don't even need to get into that because everybody already understands how disastrous that's been and how many lives have been ruined because people who, partake in a substance that doesn't hurt anybody and is certainly way less harmful than alcohol. We have the Wall Street bailout, which, of course, Joe Biden supported. These are the people who crashed the economy, and Biden rushed in and said, here, take a blank check with no strings attached, and then these same companies and these same CEOs who just bankrupted these companies, they got bonuses. They got bonuses after being abysmal failures. Why? Because of their corporate donations to politicians like Joe Biden. And Joe Biden was representing them. He's not representing the working class. Also, he supported anti-gay DOMA, Defensive Marriage Act. And, again, you would think that an issue like LGBTQ rights is obvious, that you should treat people equally and kindly and fairly, but Joe Biden disagrees with that. The only person who's consistently been on the front lines fighting for the rights of LGBTQ people, it's Bernie Sanders, and he happens to be the other option in this race. In fact, Bernie Sanders has opposed every single one of the things that I've mentioned to this point. Bernie was on the right side of these issues, Joe Biden was on the wrong side of these issues. Now, Joe Biden opposes legalized marijuana. This is at a time when about 80% of the country supports legalized recreational marijuana. Think about how behind the times he is on that front. And in my opinion, that's unforgivable that he's completely out of lockstep, not just with the Democratic base, but also the base of the entire country, just the people of the country. Again, the polls show, depending on what poll you look at, anywhere from 60% to 80% of the country wants to legalize recreational marijuana. Joe Biden opposes that. Joe Biden also opposes a wealth tax. He opposes Medicare for all, which at this point, again, is rightly becoming a litmus test for Democratic politicians. The exit polls in every state so far that has voted in this Democratic primary show that Medicare for all is above water. And that's even with the pollsters framing the question in a way that is anti Medicare for all. They try to scare people about how it's, a government takeover of healthcare. And even when you frame it in a way that's biased against Medicare for all, it wins. So Joe Biden opposes that, which also, by the way, means that 45,000 people, minimum 45,000 people, will continue to die every single year because they don't have access to basic healthcare. So, that's a huge thing to me. 500,000 medical bankruptcies we have every year. Joe Biden says tough cookies, that's how it's going to be. So this is a candidate who's very clearly not in favor of the basic change that we need, and he's making it obvious. Furthermore, he's against free college. This is another one that should be a no-brainer in the year 2020. He's also against canceling student loan debt. Across the board, any of these issues that I care deeply about, that you care deeply about, that the Democratic base cares deeply about, across the board, he opposes them. And, this gets into a bigger problem, man. The Republican Party, and they're massively flawed, and I'm not, giving them any credit here, but what they do is they throw red meat to their base constantly. They never violate that number one rule of politics, which is don't piss off your base. Joe Biden not only pisses off his base, it's a cornerstone of his ideology. The corporate Democrats, it's a cornerstone of their ideology to continue to not represent their base. In fact, they literally go into these debates and use Republican talking points and think that this won't come back, to bite them. And it won't backfire. Of course it's going to backfire. And the final thing that I'll say real quick is, story came out yesterday. Joe Biden is already admitting that Wall Street would be in his cabinet. I want you to think about that. His cabinet would be made up of Wall Street people. So he's telling you up front, I'm status quo Joe. Nothing would fundamentally change. You had Wall Street people in Obama's cabinet, Wall Street people in Trump's cabinet right now, even though Trump pretends to be a populist, he's not. And now Joe Biden is admitting up front the day before an election, I'll put the Wall Street people back in my cabinet, which means that when we have the next crash, the response will be exactly the same, meaning the elites will run out the back door with all the money, the corporations that made these terrible decisions will get bailed out, and working people will be screwed. He's telling you up front. He's warning you up front. What are you going to do with that information? And remember, on top of all of that, everything I've said to this point is 100% policy substance-based. But the little cherry on top, which is absolutely necessary, because anytime somebody honest looks at the evidence, they're stunned, is that Joe Biden has severe cognitive decline. You can call it whatever you want to call it. In all seriousness, just calling it cognitive decline is maybe a little too fair to Joe Biden, but he's struggling at the moment. He has severe cognitive decline, and he will lose to Donald Trump. So don't say you haven't been warned. You have been warned. And please share this video with your family, with your friends, your mom, your dad, particularly the older people in your life, because it is the demographic. It's the older liberals, the boomer liberals, the normie Democrats, the suburbanites, who really have changed the trajectory of this election. And I don't think they have any idea what they're getting into. A vote for Joe Biden is helping Donald Trump get reelected. It really is that simple. Vote for Bernie, vote for him today, vote for him right now, if you happen to be in one of the states that has an election today.